The first time I saw my mother's real will, it was folded inside a rusted coffee can, behind a basement wall my brother had sworn was solid brick. I remember standing there, in the cold dust of that old house, holding a flashlight in one hand and a hammer in the other, while the paper trembled between my fingers like it was alive. My mother's signature was there, her careful blue ink, her little loop on the letter M, the same handwriting she used on my birthday cards and grocery lists, and the notes she used to tape to my lunchbox when I was a girl. But that was not the part that made my knees weak. The part that changed everything was the date. The will my brother had filed in probate was 3 years older than the one in my hand. 3 years older, and very convenient for him. The paper I found behind that wall left me half of the house, half of the accounts, and one sentence that I read over and over until my eyes burned. If anything happens, and my son claims this document does not exist, ask Evelyn what she found at First Mercer Bank. I did not know any Evelyn. I did not know why my mother had hidden a will inside her own basement wall. And I certainly did not know why my older brother, Daniel, had changed the locks 2 days after her funeral, and told me, with a calm smile, that Mum had wanted things simple. Good day, dear listeners. It's Nora again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please subscribe to my channel, and like this video. And also let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Nora Whitaker. I am 46 years old, and for most of my adult life, I taught 11th grade American history at a public high school in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was never rich. I was never reckless. My life was made of ordinary things: lesson plans, grocery receipts, parent emails, grading essays at the kitchen table, and trying to keep my little condo warm in the winter without running the heat too high. Teaching history changes how you look at the world. You learn that truth is rarely found in the loudest speech. It hides in the footnotes. It sits quietly in dates, signatures, receipts, maps, and the things people hoped no one would examine closely. In my classroom, I always told my students that evidence does not shout. Evidence waits. I did not know then how much that lesson would matter in my own family. My mother, Marjorie Whitaker, had lived in the same pale yellow house for 38 years. It sat on a narrow street lined with maple trees. Not fancy, not shabby, just the kind of house that remembered birthday parties, arguments, Christmas lights, and hospital returns. My father died when I was 29, and after that, Mum became quieter but not weaker. She still worked in her garden. She still kept every receipt in labelled envelopes. She still called me every Sunday evening and asked whether my students were still pretending not to care. Daniel was 4 years older than me. He was a financial advisor with polished shoes, silver hair at the temples, and that smooth way of speaking that made people trust him before they checked what he was saying. He always looked prepared. He always knew the name of someone important. A banker, an attorney, a councilman, a retired judge from his golf club. People used to say, "Your brother is so capable." And he was. That was the dangerous part. He was capable of appearing calm while rearranging the ground under your feet. Mum and I were close, but not in a dramatic way. We did not call each other best friends. We were mother and daughter. We could sit in silence and still feel understood. She taught me to make pie crust. I helped her organize medical bills. She saved newspaper articles for my classroom and wrote little notes on them, saying, "Maybe your students would like this." In the last year of her life, after her heart began troubling her, I visited more often. Daniel visited too, but his visits were different. He arrived in suits, checked his phone in the driveway, and spoke to Mum in a voice that sounded gentle but carried instructions. "You really shouldn't be handling these things yourself anymore. Let me simplify this for you. Mum, paperwork overwhelms you." At first, I thought he was being helpful. Families often confuse control with care, especially when illness enters the house. A person becomes fragile, and everyone starts reaching for the steering wheel. Then small things began to bother me. Mum stopped mentioning her bank statements. She used to call me when she could not understand a charge or when her insurance sent something confusing. Suddenly, she would say, "Daniel is looking into that." When I asked if she wanted me to help too, she smiled and changed the subject. One Sunday, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold beside her. In front of her was an envelope from First Mercer Bank, unopened. "Want me to look at that?" I asked. She placed her hand over the envelope quickly, too quickly. "No, honey, not today." I did not push. A good teacher learns when a student is not ready to answer. You do not force the truth out of someone by embarrassing them. You make the room safe enough for the truth to walk in by itself. But I noticed. A month later, Daniel called me on a Tuesday evening. Nora, I think it would be better if you didn't upset Mum with questions about money. I was standing in my kitchen, rinsing a mug, and I remember turning off the faucet. What questions? She mentioned you asked about bank mail. I asked if she needed help opening an envelope. He gave a soft laugh. Not cruel, almost disappointed. You can see how that might make her anxious. There it was, the first lesson in manipulation. The person doing something wrong often accuses you of causing the discomfort created by their secrecy. I said, Daniel, Mum can ask either of us for help. Of course, he said. But she signed a power of attorney for me, so legally, I'm the point person. That was news to me. When did that happen? A while ago. Don't make it into something. I stared at the sink, at the little circle of tea stain inside my mug. I'm not making it into anything. I'm asking. And I'm answering, he said, still polite. Let's not divide the family over paperwork. After we hung up, I wrote the date and time of that call on a yellow legal pad. I did not know why. Maybe because teachers document patterns. If a student changes behavior, misses assignments, and stops making eye contact, you write it down before the parent meeting. You do not trust memory when emotions are involved. That legal pad became the first page of a record that would later fill 3 binders. Mum died in late October, on a rainy Thursday morning. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and wilted flowers. Daniel stood on one side of the bed. I stood on the other. In her last clear hour, Mum squeezed my hand and whispered something I could not understand. I bent closer. Basement, she said. I thought she wanted me to check the furnace. The old house always had trouble when the weather changed. What about the basement, Mum? Her eyes moved toward Daniel, then back to me. Don't let him. Then the nurse came in. Then the machines changed their rhythm. Then my mother was gone, and grief became a room with no doors. 2 days after the funeral, I drove to Mum's house with a casserole dish from a neighbor still sitting in the passenger seat. I had my old key on the ring, the same brass key I had carried for 20 years. It did not fit. At first, I thought my hand was shaking too badly. I tried again. The key went in halfway and stopped. Daniel opened the door before I could knock a second time. He wore a navy sweater and looked rested in a way that felt almost offensive. Nora, he said, I was going to call you. You changed the locks. For security. Without telling me. His face softened, as if I were a child misunderstanding an adult situation. There have been people in and out. Hospice workers, neighbors, church ladies. I didn't want anything going missing. Mum's not even buried a week. His expression did not change. That's exactly why we need order. Behind him I could see the hallway, the old runner rug, Mum's umbrella stand, the framed photo of my father holding a fish he had not actually caught. The house looked normal, but the doorway had become a border. I'd like to come in, I said. Not today. I felt something inside me go still. Why not? There are estate matters to handle. The attorney advised limiting access. What attorney? Graham Beatty. He handled Mum's documents. I knew the name. Everyone in Daniel's business circle knew Graham Beatty. Smooth probate lawyer, expensive watch, charity board photographs. Daniel stepped onto the porch and pulled the door closer behind him. Mum's will is straightforward. She left the house to me. You'll receive some personal items and a cash bequest. A cash bequest? His voice stayed soft. $25,000. For a moment, I could hear only the rain ticking against the gutters. That doesn't sound like Mum. He sighed. Not sadly. Strategically. Nora, please don't turn grief into suspicion. I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. His clean fingernails. His sympathetic eyes. The way he had positioned his body to block the door without seeming to. I want a copy of the will. You'll get one through the proper process. I want to see Mum's room. Not today. That was when I understood something I had taught my students for years, but had never felt in my own bones. Power does not always slam a door. Sometimes it closes it gently, and calls that kindness. I left without raising my voice. I drove 3 blocks, pulled into a grocery store parking lot, and sat there with the engine running. Rain blurred the windshield. My phone sat in my lap. My mother's last words sat in my chest. Basement. I did not cry then. Fear is strange. It does not always make you small. Sometimes it makes you precise. I opened my legal pad and wrote, Daniel changed locks, refused access, Claims will leaves house to him. Mentions Graham Beatty. Mum's last word. Basement. The first copy of the filed will arrived 11 days later. It was 4 pages long. My mother supposedly signed it in 2018, leaving Daniel the house, her investment accounts, and authority over all financial and personal effects. I was left $25,000, her sewing machine, and such family photographs as Daniel Whitaker deems appropriate. That phrase made my stomach tighten, as Daniel deems appropriate. My mother would never have written that. She was fair to a fault. When my father died, she divided his tools between Daniel and me by asking us each to choose one item at a time, like children taking turns on a playground. She believed fairness prevented resentment from growing roots. The will had 2 witnesses. One was a woman named Evelyn Hart. The other was a man I did not know, Walter Price. The notary stamp belonged to a mobile notary service that no longer appeared to exist online. I called Daniel after I read it. "This isn't right," I said. He was quiet for half a second. I expected this reaction. "Did Mum ever tell you she was leaving me almost nothing?" "Nora, you were always independent." "That isn't an answer. Mum worried about you," he said. "She thought a lump sum would be simpler." "You've never been comfortable with investments." I almost laughed. I had taught the causes of the Great Depression to teenagers for 20 years. I understood investments well enough to know when someone was using vocabulary as a locked gate. "I want to speak with Graham Beatty. He represents the estate. Then I'll get my own attorney." His voice cooled by only a few degrees. "That's your right. But think carefully. Legal fights drain estates. Mum would hate that." There it was again. Mum would hate that. A dead woman's wishes placed in the mouth of the person controlling her money. After we hung up, I did not call him again. Instead, I made copies. I scanned the will, the envelope, every letter. I created a folder on my laptop named Mum Estate, and another on a flash drive. Then I called 3 probate attorneys and left messages. The first 2 sounded hurried. The third called back herself. Her name was Lydia Marsh. She had a low, steady voice and an office above a pharmacy in Hyde Park. When I met her, she wore no jewelry except a plain gold band and had stacks of case folders arranged with the kind of order that made me trust her immediately. She read the will without interrupting me. Then she read my notes. When she reached the line about Mum's last word, she looked up. "Basement? Yes. Do you still have legal access to the house? I have a key that no longer works. Are you named in the will? Yes, but barely. Then you are an interested party. We can petition for supervised access to retrieve personal items and inspect property, especially if there is concern about documents." "Do you think there's concern?" She leaned back. "I think there are questions. Questions are not proof, but they are where proof begins." That sounded like something I would write on a classroom board. Lydia told me not to confront Daniel, not to accuse, not to send emotional emails. She told me to communicate only in writing when possible, and to preserve every message. "Your brother may be perfectly innocent," she said. "But if he isn't, the first thing he'll want is for you to look unstable." I looked down at my hands. "I'm not unstable. I believe you," she said. "Now we make sure the record believes you too." That sentence stayed with me. Over the next 3 weeks, we moved slowly. Lydia filed a request for estate documents, including bank records, prior estate plans, and any communications related to Mum's capacity. Daniel's attorney responded with polished resistance. He called the request burdensome, emotionally motivated, and unsupported by evidence. I had seen students write essays like that, long sentences designed to hide the fact that they did not have an answer. Then, unexpectedly, Daniel agreed to let me enter the house for 1 hour to collect personal sentimental items, provided that his attorney's assistant was present. Lydia advised me to accept. "Do not argue," she said. "Do not search wildly. Observe, photograph what you are allowed to photograph. If something matters, tell me afterward." The house smelled stale when I walked in. Not dirty exactly, just abandoned. The kind of stillness that falls over a home when the person who loved it is gone. A young woman from Graham Beatty's office stood near the door with a clipboard. Her name was Claire. She was polite and uncomfortable. Daniel was there too. "Let's keep this respectful," he said. I looked at him, then past him. "I intend to." I went first to Mum's bedroom. Her quilt was folded at the foot of the bed. Her hairbrush sat on the dresser with a few silver strands still caught in it. I picked up the small jewelry box my father had given her and felt Daniel watching from the doorway. "You can take that," he said. "I already removed the valuable pieces for inventory." Of course he had. I said nothing. I took photographs of the dresser, the closet, the empty file cabinet in the corner. That file cabinet had once been full. Insurance papers, tax returns, appliance warranties, old Christmas card lists. Now the drawers opened with a hollow metal scrape. In the kitchen, I noticed something else. The ceramic rooster cookie jar was missing. That sounds silly, I know, but Mum had kept spare keys, rubber bands, and odd little notes in that cookie jar for as long as I could remember. Its absence felt deliberate. Then I asked to see the basement. Daniel smiled. "There's nothing down there but old paint and spiders. Mum mentioned the basement before she died." His smile thinned. Mum was on medication. Claire shifted her weight. "I would like to see it," I said. Daniel glanced at Claire, then opened the basement door. The stairs creaked under me, each step familiar. The basement was unfinished, with concrete floors, exposed beams, and that damp mineral smell old houses carry beneath them. My father had kept tools on one side. Mum stored canning jars and Christmas decorations on the other. I swept my flashlight slowly along the walls. That was the first time I saw the patch. It was behind the old laundry sink, low and slightly uneven, a section of brick that looked newer than the rest, but painted over in the same dull grey. If I had been in a hurry, I would have missed it, but teachers learn to notice the student who erases too hard, the paragraph that sounds copied, the silence after a question. "Did Dad repair that wall?" I asked. Daniel answered too quickly. "Yes." "After what?" "Water issue. Years ago." I crouched. There was dust everywhere, except along the bottom edge of that patch, where the floor showed faint scrape marks. "You're getting your coat dirty," Daniel said. "I'm aware." Claire looked down at her clipboard and pretended not to listen. I did not touch the wall. I did not reveal interest. I stood, brushed dust from my sleeve, and spent the rest of the hour gathering photographs and 2 boxes of personal items. But when I left, my heartbeat had changed. The petition for further access took 12 days. Daniel opposed it, of course. Graham Beatty argued that I had already been granted reasonable opportunity. Lydia argued that an empty file cabinet, a changed lock, and an unexplained basement alteration justified a limited inspection for estate documents. The magistrate granted 2 hours. This time Lydia came with me, along with a licensed contractor she trusted named Mr. Alvarez. Daniel came too, wearing a grey suit and an expression of wounded patience. "This is absurd," he said as we entered the basement. Lydia did not look at him. "Then it should be quick." Mr. Alvarez studied the patched section. He tapped the brick lightly with the handle of a screwdriver. The sound changed near the center. "Hollow behind here," he said. Daniel stepped forward. "You can't damage estate property." Lydia held up the court order. "Limited inspection includes non-structural removal if reasonably necessary." "It is structural." Mr. Alvarez looked at him. "No, sir, it isn't." I remember the sound of the first brick coming loose, a gritty scrape, a small cough of dust. My mouth went dry. Behind the patch was a narrow cavity between the brick and foundation wall. Inside sat an old metal coffee can, the kind with a red plastic lid, wrapped in a grocery bag that had gone brittle with age. No one spoke. Lydia put on gloves before she touched it. She opened the can on the basement workbench beneath the weak yellow bulb. Inside were 3 things: a sealed envelope with my name on it, a folded will, and a bank safe deposit receipt from First Mercer Bank dated 8 months before my mother died. Daniel's face did not collapse. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, it went completely still, like a curtain dropping behind his eyes. Lydia looked at him. "Mr. Whittaker, I suggest you call your attorney," he said, very softly. "This is a misunderstanding." I picked up the envelope with my name on it, but Lydia stopped me. "Not here," she said. "We preserve chain of custody." Chain of custody. Such cold words for the moment your mother reaches out from behind a wall. That night, I sat at my kitchen table until nearly 3 in the morning. The envelope had been opened at Lydia's office, scanned, witnessed, and placed in evidence storage. She had given me a copy of the letter. "My dearest Nora, if you are reading this, then I was right to worry. I have made a new will because I no longer trust what Daniel is telling me about my money. He says he is protecting me, but things have gone missing from my accounts, and when I ask questions, he makes me feel foolish. I found something at First Mercer Bank that frightened me. Evelyn Hart helped me understand it. If Daniel says the old will is the only will, ask Evelyn about the cashier's checks and the trust account. I am ashamed that I let this happen. Mothers are supposed to know their children, but sometimes love makes us slow to admit what fear already knows. You are not to fight for money, fight for truth. There is a difference. I love you, I trust you. Mum. I read those lines until I could almost hear her voice. Then I took out my legal pad and made a list. Find Evelyn Hart, identify First Mercer account, compare wills, preserve evidence, do not call Daniel. I underlined the last one twice. I was not brave. I was careful. The next morning, Lydia's office located Evelyn Hart. She was a retired trust officer who had worked at First Mercer Bank for 31 years. She was 72 now and living in northern Kentucky. When Lydia contacted her, Evelyn agreed to meet us, but only in Lydia's office. She arrived wearing a beige raincoat and carrying a folder in both hands. Her face was lined, serious, and kind in the way librarians and nurses can be kind without becoming soft. I hoped Marjorie was wrong, she said after introductions. I really did. Lydia asked her to start at the beginning. Evelyn explained that my mother had come into the bank after noticing withdrawals from an investment-linked checking account. At first, the transactions looked legitimate because Daniel held power of attorney, but Mum insisted she had not authorized several transfers. Evelyn reviewed what she could and noticed cashier's checks issued to a business entity called Wexford Advisory Services. That was Daniel's company, I said. Evelyn nodded. There were also transfers into a trust account that did not match the trust your mother described. What trust? Evelyn opened her folder and slid out a photocopy. The Marjorie Whittaker Family Education Trust. I had never heard of it. My mother had created a trust to support scholarships for students at my high school, with the remainder divided between Daniel and me. She had apparently funded it with money from a small lottery win she had never told us about. Not millions. Not the kind of money that ruins people instantly in movies. But enough. A little over $700,000 after taxes. Quietly invested, quietly protected, quietly meant to do good. I sat there unable to speak. Mum had won that money 6 years earlier, from a state lottery ticket, bought at a grocery store. She had told almost no one. Evelyn said Mum wanted privacy, and had asked the bank how to structure charitable giving without becoming the woman everyone called for donations. But after Daniel became power of attorney, the scholarship trust stalled. Funds moved, documents changed. A replacement will appeared, and when Mum questioned him, he told her she was confused. Evelyn's voice shook only once. I told Marjorie to speak with an attorney outside the family. She did. I witnessed the new will. Then why wasn't it filed? I asked. Because she was afraid Daniel would find it. Lydia leaned forward. Do you have records? Evelyn looked at me. I have copies of what I was legally permitted to retain, and notes I made at the time. I also have the name of the attorney who drafted the later will. He died last year, but his files may still exist. That was the first time the flaw beneath Daniel's story cracked wide enough for light to come through. But it also created a darker question. If my mother had hidden the will because she was afraid of Daniel, what else had she hidden? Daniel began applying pressure before we even filed the will contest. First came a text. Nora, I know emotions are high. Please do not let Lydia Marsh poison what's left of this family. I screenshot it. Then an email. Mum had periods of confusion. You know that. Producing some paper from a basement does not change medical reality. I forwarded it to Lydia. Then a phone call from my cousin Beth, who had always admired Daniel because he helped her refinance her house. Can't you just settle? She asked. Daniel says you're accusing him of stealing from your dying mother. I'm asking for records. He says you're trying to take everything. I'm trying to find out what happened. Beth sighed. You always were stubborn. After that call, I sat in my classroom after school, staring at essays about Reconstruction, while my phone buzzed with family messages. Some were gentle, some were ugly. Most had one thing in common. They repeated Daniel's phrases. Emotionally motivated, confused. Influenced by an aggressive attorney, trying to embarrass the family. That was when I realized he was not just defending himself. He was teaching other people what to believe before evidence arrived. A good teacher knows the power of first impressions. The first version of a story often becomes the answer key in people's minds. Correcting it later takes twice the proof. So I did not argue with relatives. I answered once. I'm following legal advice and allowing the court to review the documents. Then I stopped responding. Lydia brought in a forensic accountant named Priya Shah. Priya was small, brisk, and terrifyingly precise. She reviewed bank records we obtained through subpoena and built a timeline on a spreadsheet so detailed it looked like a map of a crime. The transfers began 16 months after Mum's lottery win. At first, they were small: $5,000 to Wexford Advisory for portfolio review, then $12,000, then $28,000 labelled as tax strategy. Later, money moved into a trust account at a private bank Daniel used for clients. The account title was similar to Mum's scholarship trust, but not identical. Marjorie Whittaker Education Legacy Fund. One word changed. Family became legacy. That one word was a trapdoor. Priya explained it patiently. Your mother's original trust named a charitable purpose, then you and your brother as remainder beneficiaries. This second entity appears controlled by Daniel as trustee, with broad administrative fees payable to his firm. How much did he take? Priya looked at Lydia before answering. Direct fees, about $184,000. Transfers to related entities, another $210,000. There may be more hidden through investments. The room became very quiet. I thought of Mum sitting at her kitchen table, confused by envelopes. I thought of Daniel telling her paperwork overwhelmed her. I thought of every student I had ever watched lose confidence because someone powerful convinced them they were stupid. Anger rose in me then, but it was not fire. It was a stone, heavy, useful, something to build with. The point of no return came from an old email. Lydia's subpoena to Graham Beatty's office produced correspondence between Daniel and Beatty from the year Mum signed the older will. Most of it was cautious. Lawyers know how to write as if every sentence may one day be read aloud in a courtroom. But Daniel had made one mistake. He forwarded Beatty an email from Mum, then added his own note above it. Mum is asking about the scholarship trust again. We need to make sure the estate plan avoids confusion and keeps Nora from interfering. She is sentimental and will create problems. Below his note was Mum's original email. Daniel, I do not understand why the school scholarship account is lower than Evelyn said it should be. Please bring all documents Sunday. I want Nora there too. I printed that email and held it in my hand for a long time. That was when I understood. My mother had not excluded me. She had tried to bring me in. Daniel had simply stood between us until the room went dark. A week later, he came to my condo. It was just after sunset. I had been making soup, and the whole kitchen smelled like onions and thyme. When I opened the door, Daniel stood under the porch light holding his leather gloves. He looked tired for the first time. May I come in? No. A flicker crossed his face. Nora, we can speak here. He glanced toward the neighboring doors. This is private. Then lower your voice. For several seconds we just looked at each other. I saw the boy who once taught me to ride a bike. I saw the man who changed the locks on our mother's house. Grief does not erase history. It makes you hold two truths at once until your hands ache. He said, you don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. Lydia is using you. The accountant is running up fees. By the time this is over, there won't be anything left. Then provide the records voluntarily. His jaw tightened. You always think being calm makes you right. No, I said. Evidence makes me right or wrong. He looked away, then back. I protected Mum from herself. She was giving money away. Scholarships, church funds, neighbours with sob stories. She had no sense of scale. It was her money. She was vulnerable. And that made it easier? His eyes sharpened. Be careful. There it was. Not loud, not theatrical. Just two words placed neatly on my porch, like a knife wrapped in cloth. I felt my pulse in my throat, but my voice stayed steady. Every conversation from now on goes through Lydia. He leaned closer. You think court will make you feel better. You think strangers reading our mother's medical records and bank statements will restore your dignity. I said, my dignity isn't missing. For the first time, he looked truly angry. Then he smiled. You'll regret this. I watched him walk back to his car. After he drove away, I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a moment. My soup had begun to burn. The smoke alarm chirped once, then stopped. I wrote down everything he said. The legal process was not dramatic in the way television teaches people to expect. There was no surprise witness bursting through the doors, no attorney shouting, "Objection," while everyone gasped. Real legal pressure is slower. It is paper against paper, dates against lies, signatures against memory. Lydia filed a formal will contest and a civil complaint alleging undue influence, financial exploitation, breach of fiduciary duty, and conversion of estate assets. Graham Beatty withdrew from representing the estate after his firm's emails became evidence. Daniel hired a larger firm downtown. They responded aggressively. They claimed Mum lacked capacity when she signed the later will. They claimed Evelyn Hart had influenced her. They claimed I had manipulated Mum during her illness. They claimed the basement document could have been planted. That accusation almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it revealed how desperate they had become. I had been supervised by Daniel, Claire, Lydia, and a contractor when the wall was opened. The coffee can had dust patterns, dated materials, and fingerprints later identified as Mum's and Evelyn's. The truth has a weight of its own. At Daniel's deposition, Lydia asked questions for nearly 6 hours. I sat beside her, hands folded, saying nothing. Daniel wore a charcoal suit and answered in the same smooth tone he had used on my porch. Did your mother ask you to bring documents concerning the scholarship trust on March 14, 2021? I don't recall. Lydia placed the email in front of him. Does this refresh your recollection? He looked at it. She may have asked, why did you tell Attorney Beatty that Nora would interfere? I was concerned about family conflict. Were you concerned that Nora would ask questions about transfers to Wexford Advisory Services? His attorney objected. Daniel answered anyway. No. Lydia moved to the bank records. Please identify this transfer of $28,000. Administrative consulting fee. What consulting did Wexford perform for your mother that month? I would have to check. You are Wexford, correct? I own the firm. And you approved the fee? As power of attorney, yes. And you paid it to your own firm? It was disclosed. To whom? He paused. To Marjorie. Lydia slid another document forward. Please read the highlighted line. Daniel's face changed by half an inch. It was a note from Evelyn's file, after a meeting with Mum. Marjorie states she does not recognize Wexford fees, and says Daniel told her there were no charges because he is family. Lydia let the silence sit. Then she asked, was your mother lying? Daniel's attorney objected again, sharper this time. But the room had shifted. Everyone felt it. Daniel's story was no longer a wall. It was a curtain, and the light behind it was beginning to show. The probate hearing came in March. By then, winter had thinned into grey rain. I remember walking into the courthouse with Lydia, carrying one binder while she carried another. I had taught students about courthouses before. The marble steps, the flags, the language of justice. But standing there for your own family is different. You feel very small and very visible at the same time. The judge was a woman in her 60s, with silver glasses and no patience for performance. She listened. She took notes. She asked precise questions. Evelyn testified first. Her voice was steady. She explained the bank irregularities, Mum's fear, the later will, and the safe deposit receipt. She admitted she had advised Mum to seek independent counsel but denied pressuring her. She was embarrassed, Evelyn said. Not confused, embarrassed. Then Priya testified. She walked through the transfers with clinical calm. Dates, amounts, account titles, related entities, administrative fees. She explained that Daniel had benefited personally while acting under power of attorney. Daniel's attorney tried to make it sound complicated. Isn't it possible these were legitimate financial management fees? Priya looked at him. Possible in theory, not supported by the documentation. Could Marjorie Whittaker have verbally approved them? Verbal approval would not cure self-dealing under the fiduciary obligations at issue, especially where the records show she questioned the charges. I nearly smiled. Priya did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She had brought the homework, and Daniel had not done his. When Daniel testified, he looked smaller from across the courtroom. Still polished, still controlled, but thinner somehow. He spoke about burden. About being the responsible child. About Mum's confusion. About my distance from financial matters. About protecting the estate from emotional decisions. Then Lydia asked him about the locks. Why did you change them 2 days after the funeral? Security. Did you provide Nora with a key? No. Why not? I believed access should be orderly. Did Marjorie Whittaker ever instruct you to keep Nora out of the house? No. Did she instruct you to include Nora in discussions about the scholarship trust? His attorney objected. The judge allowed the question. Daniel swallowed. She sent an email. That is not what I asked. He looked at Lydia. Yes. Lydia picked up the later will. And after she asked that Nora be included, you contacted Attorney Beatty about an estate plan that would, in your words, keep Nora from interfering. correct?" He did not answer right away. "Correct?" Lydia repeated. Yes, there was no gasp in the courtroom. Real life rarely gives you that. But I felt something inside me unlock. The judge did not rule from the bench that day. She took the matter under advisement. Those 3 weeks of waiting were harder than I expected. I went to school. I graded essays. I reminded students to cite their sources. I stood in front of a whiteboard explaining checks and balances, while my own life hung between documents and a decision. Then Lydia called. "Nora," she said. "The court admitted the later will." I sat down in the teacher's lounge with my coat still on. What does that mean? It means the 2021 will controls. The court found evidence of undue influence surrounding the earlier estate plan and serious concerns regarding Daniel's fiduciary conduct. The judge is appointing an independent administrator. Daniel is removed. I closed my eyes. Lydia continued, gentler now. There will still be accounting and recovery, but the house is no longer his to control. What about the money? We pursue restitution through the civil case. The county prosecutor has also requested the file. I opened my eyes. Outside the lounge window, students were crossing the parking lot, laughing in the cold like the world had not changed. Maybe it had not changed for them, but it had for me. The final settlement came 8 months later, after Daniel's larger firm apparently explained to him what trial could do to his professional license and reputation. He agreed to repay a significant portion of the diverted funds, surrender his claim to estate control, and release all interest in the house beyond what the valid will allowed. His advisory license was suspended pending further review. The prosecutor filed charges related to financial exploitation and falsified fiduciary accounting. I will not pretend I celebrated that. Watching your brother face criminal consequences is not victory in the simple sense. It is grief wearing a judge's robe. Daniel never apologized. He sent one letter through his attorney, stating that he regretted the family discord. Lydia advised me not to answer. I didn't. The house was eventually sold, but not quickly. I spent several weekends there first, cleaning, sorting, returning the rooms to dignity. I found Mum's ceramic rooster cookie jar in a box in the garage. Inside were rubber bands, 2 spare keys, and a folded recipe for lemon cake. No secret note, no hidden fortune, just proof that she had once stood in that kitchen believing ordinary things were safe. I kept the recipe. The scholarship trust was restored with what we recovered, and I helped rename it the Marjorie Whittaker Quiet Courage Scholarship. The first recipient was a student named Alana who wanted to become a social worker. She wrote in her application that people often need one adult to believe them before they can believe themselves. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I cried. Not the sharp crying from the funeral. Not the frightened crying from those first nights. This was different, softer, like a knot finally loosening. I did receive money from the estate, more than I expected. Enough to pay off my condo, replace my old car, and take a summer trip to Maine, where I stood by the ocean and watched waves fold themselves over black rocks. I did not buy a mansion. I did not become a different person. I planted lavender in pots by my kitchen window. I bought better shoes for teaching. I donated classroom sets of books to 3 schools where teachers had been buying supplies with their own paychecks. And I kept teaching. Because after everything, I understood my work differently. Every document matters. Every quiet student matters. Every person who says, something isn't right, deserves to be heard before someone powerful calls them emotional. Sometimes people ask whether I hate Daniel. I don't know how to answer that. Hate is loud, and I have lived through enough noise. What I feel is distance, a locked gate where there used to be a road. I can remember loving my brother without allowing him near my life again. That is one of the hardest lessons adulthood teaches us. Forgiveness does not require access. My mother's house is gone now. A young couple bought it. They painted the front door blue and planted tulips where Mum used to grow marigolds. I drove by once in spring and saw a child's bicycle on the porch. For a moment, I missed everything. Then I realized I was not missing the house exactly. I was missing the version of our family I thought had lived inside it. But truth is a kind of home too. Not always warm at first, not always pretty, but solid. A place where you can finally stop pretending. My mother hid her will behind a basement wall, because she was afraid no one would believe her. I found it because, at the end, she trusted me with one word: basement. One word was enough, because I listened. So if there is a lesson in my story, it is this. When something feels wrong, do not let politeness make you blind. Do not let family pressure make you careless. Do not confuse calm manipulation with truth. Write things down. Keep copies. Ask questions. Get help from people who understand the law. And never believe that wanting answers makes you greedy. Money was never the real inheritance. The real inheritance was my mother's final act of trust. She did not leave me rich. She left me the truth. And the truth gave me back my life. Now I want to ask you, dear listeners, what would you have done if your own brother locked you out of your mother's house and you found a hidden will behind the basement wall? Would you have confronted him right away, or would you have stayed quiet and gathered evidence first? Tell me in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs the courage to trust what they notice. And if you have not subscribed yet, I hope you will stay with me for the next story.